slides, and I'll try to speak up and not speak too fast, but let me know. I'm not used to speaking in such a large So as Heath mentioned, my talk is based on the book, the research that I did for the museum's recently published book, The Badge of a Freemason, Masonic Aprons from the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library. And so the aprons that I'm going to show you are all in the collection at the museum, which is in Lexington, Massachusetts. And soon after the museum was founded in 1975, excuse me, the collection began to grow. And Masonic aprons were among some of the first donations. Today we have more than 500 examples, and it's one of the largest collections of Masonic and fraternal aprons in the world. So just before I start, I wanted to let you know that we do have an exhibition up right now of aprons that is based also on the book. And we are open Wednesday through Saturday from 10 to 4. We have free admission, free parking. And the exhibit will be up until next March. And we will be changing several of the aprons in the show in the fall for preservation reasons, because we don't like to leave them out in the sort of higher light levels for too long. So I want to encourage you all to come now or come later or come both, and you can kind of get 2 exhibits for one if you do that. So to begin, the Freemasons in the audience, I think most of you are, will know that the fraternity's aprons are inspired by the protective work aprons worn by actual stonemasons during the 1600s and 1700s. And so when I wrote the book, I arranged the aprons chronologically in order to show that evolution in style, also the evolution in shape and design. And during the early period, in the mid and the late 1700s, most Masonic aprons were made out of leather and retained that animal shape that they were made from, the animal skin shape, with the ties extending at the top from the leg-shaped pieces of the leather. And they were also often longer, like the work aprons that inspired them. Sometimes the aprons would even reach down to the wearer's knees. You can kind of see that, and this is a engraving by William Hogarth from London, and then this is a Dutch and French engraving, where again you can see that the men are wearing, this guy especially is wearing longer aprons. So I've got 10 things that you probably didn't know about aprons. No offense to David Letterman. And there's no real, they're not really in any order other than, I guess, my preference at the time. So, number 1, during the 1700s and early 1800s, one apron could be worn for meetings of different Masonic groups. And so when you look at a lot of Masonic aprons, like I have, you start to see that there was very little in the way of rules or regulations about apron design. And this is an example from the early 1800s. And you'll see it's got both red and blue trimming on the edges, which my working theory is that the apron was worn at the first 3 degree rituals and at Royal Arch ritual. The inclusion of the red Maltese cross at the top right, make it out, right there. And then the black patriarchal crosses at the corners suggests that the owner had received the Knights Templar degree. Royal Arch chapters and Knights Templar commanderies were not formalized until the 18-teens and 1820s. And so prior to that, these degrees were conferred in the lodge without the formal divisions that exist today. This apron was found in a house in Lexington and is thought to have been used by a local Freemason. So, number 2, this is one of my favorites. Inscriptions and family stories are not always correct, especially when they involve famous people. So we'll start at the top, George Washington. And there are 2 aprons that are documented to have been owned by Washington. Two. One is the Watson and Cassell apron at Alexandria Washington Lodge, number 22. And there's also one at a lodge in West Virginia that was recently discovered. Sadly, as you know, neither one of those is at the Scottish Rite Masonic Museum and Library. However, we have one that came to us with that story, which I'll talk about in a second. And I hear from people with others at least once a year. So when this apron was donated to the museum in 2006, it was accompanied by very, very detailed family history, which also noted that it had been owned by George Washington. However, it was pretty clear to me from when it walked in the door that there's no way that this apron and George Washington coexisted at the same time. because this apron, based on its shape and its style, dates to the 1820s or the 1830s, which is quite a ways after Washington's death in 1799. The documented history of the apron starts after the Civil War, and unfortunately, I still haven't quite been able to figure out how the Loud family that owned it, how it came into the family, or how it first got identified as George Washington's. But I felt good that I could sort of at least start to return some of its proper history to it. And this is another one. It was passed down in the Irwin family of Louisiana before the museum purchased it in 1989. And according to the family history, the Marquis de Lafayette wore this apron during his visit to Nashville while he was on his American tour in 1824 and 1825. And so the story goes that Isaac Irwin traveled with Lafayette's party from New Orleans to Nashville. And during Lafayette's Nashville visit, he attended a Masonic meeting, and Irwin also attended. So the story goes that at the end of the evening, Irwin told Lafayette that his wife was pregnant, and if she had a boy, they would name him Lafayette. In response, Lafayette reportedly took off this apron and handed it to Irwin, saying, "Here, give him this in memory of me, and perhaps it will at some time serve to recall my visit." Great story, right? However, verifying the story is a little challenging. But unlike the Washington apron that I just showed, this apron itself does support that family story. It does date to the 1820s. There's a printed inscription that you can't see in the slide very well at the bottom that reads, "Engraved by Jervis Cutler, Nashville, dedicated to the lodges in Tennessee," which places it in the right location for Lafayette to have worn it. And Cutler was born in Massachusetts in 1768, and then he moved around to Ohio, Pennsylvania, back to New England, Louisiana, and then settled in Nashville in the early 1820s, where he worked as an engraver. And he was a Freemason. He joined American Union Lodge No. 1 in Marietta, Ohio in 1803. And Nashville Lodge No. 37 admitted him in June 1825. While he was in Nashville during the 1820s, Cutler engraved the design for this apron, as well as illustrative plates for the Masonic manual, and you can see one here, which was written by Wilkins Tannehill and was published in 1894 when Tannehill was Grand Master of Tennessee. So Lafayette came to Nashville on May 4th, 1825, and he did conclude the day at the Grand Lodge. Isaac Irwin's name doesn't appear in any of the records I've looked at so far, but it's possible that he accompanied Lafayette from Louisiana to Nashville. And genealogical records confirm that while Irwin did have a son named Lafayette, he was born 4 years later in 1829. So the story of this apron is bolstered by the existence of another apron that was given to Lafayette in Boston, where he assisted with laying the cornerstone of the Bunker Hill Monument on June 17, 1825. At the end of the banquet, following the ceremony, Lafayette reportedly gave the apron he was wearing to one of the marshals who assisted him. And that apron, which you can see here, is now in the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts collection. So I leave it to you to be your own history detective and make your own decision about whether the story about the printed apron is true. And so number 3, women made many of the Masonic aprons used during the early 1800s. So there's been a lot of study of Masonic and fraternal regalia that gives a lot of evidence that women were involved during the 1800s. They supported their family members as well as the larger fraternal community. And by stitching a Masonic apron or a collar, a woman could support her husband or her father's Masonic activities. And she might, pick up a little bit of the symbolism along the way and also feel connected to him. So creating these objects also offered an opportunity for the woman to display her skill. And you can see this one is silk, and it's both painted and embroidered. And it overlaps a lot with the aesthetics and the materials that were taught to young women at young ladies' academies during the early 1800s. So this apron, Keith will be very excited. It was owned by a Mason from Amicable Lodge.
John Taba.
Yes. See, I knew you could just come up here and do it. He joined Amicable in 1814 and later worked as deputy sheriff of Middlesex County. When the museum purchased the apron in 1996, it had a note that suggested that the Masonic apron was painted and embroidered by his niece. John Tarbell did have 5 nieces who survived to adulthood, and the oldest was born in 1808. So Tarbell's election as master of his lodge in December 1821 could have merited a new apron. And at the time, his 2 oldest nieces were 13 and 11, which suggests them as possible makers. I did a little more research, and Tarbell also had 3 daughters. The oldest was born in 1809, and so it's possible that she could have made the apron as well. So, number 4. During the 1700s and early 1800s, there was no copyright. Apron makers could and did use other people's designs. So these 3 aprons, the 2 aprons on the left, show designs that are influenced by the apron on the right. Hopefully you can see that. I know it's a little bit small. So the one on the right was by Edward Horseman, who became a Freemason in 1802 in Boston. And in 1814, the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts was very happy about his design and described it as a judicious selection of the emblems of the order arranged with taste and propriety. Even after his death in 1819, newspaper advertisements directed prospective customers to the shop of Mr. William Biddle for aprons from the plate of the late Edward Horseman. The museum and library has 5 Horseman aprons in its collection, and I have seen many, many more in the collections of various Massachusetts lodges. This, to me, suggests the design's really wide appeal during the early 1800s, as well as its accessibility as source material. So this one, which was probably painted during the 1820s, has a nice flowering vine that's been added above the archway. And this may, again, indicate that the maker was a woman who received training at a local academy. Similar vines appear on furniture, ceramics, quilts, and samplers from the early 1800s. And this one has a printed design, and it includes a curved line that you can see at the top, forming a false flap. And then the apron was painted in gold and green to add shiny color. Unfortunately, we don't know who originally owned that apron. So, number 5. Good craftsmen recognized a lucrative market when they saw one, and Freemasons were a lucrative market. The design of this apron was the result of collaboration between a Freemason and a non-Freemason. It was probably inspired by a design seen on a transfer-printed English ceramic pitcher. And many of these pictures traveled over from England to America. It's possible that designer and Freemason consider Sterry saw or owned a pitcher with the design and then asked Elkanah Tisdale to engrave it for the apron. Sterry was a member of Norwich, Connecticut's Somerset Lodge number 34, which had been chartered in 1795, and he was also a charter member of the local Royal Arch chapter. According to a printed inscription under the flap of this apron, it too resulted from the collaboration of a Freemason and an engraver. And underneath it reads, "For sale by E. Huntington, engraver, Hartford, Connecticut, 1826, A. Andros." Details on this arrangement between these 2 men are fairly elusive. I'm a little unclear on whether Andros designed the apron or if he simply ordered it from Huntington. Andros was a member of Hartford's St. John's Lodge number 4, and he served that lodge as Tyler from 1820 to 1822. And he also worked as a blacksmith. Eleazar Huntington, who was an engraver and a penmanship master, ran an advertisement in the Hartford newspapers in March 1826, offering what was probably the template for this Master Mason apron. And the ad reads, "A fine impression upon satin, leather, and cotton, neatly finished, at low prices from $1 to $2. By 1817, Huntington was a partner in the Hartford Graphic and Banknote Engraving Company with Elkanah Tisdale, who I just mentioned, Abel Brewster, Asaph Willard, and Nathaniel Jocelyn. So the company was kind of short-lived. The partners liquidated it 4 years later in 1821. But I was pretty interesting to see that at least 3 of the partners, Tisdale, Jocelyn, and Huntington, engraved Masonic aprons during the 18-teens and 1820s. And again, this just adds more evidence to how attractive that Masonic market was for these craftsmen, and that they saw a business opportunity, even though they weren't Freemasons themselves. popularity of colorful aprons was part of a larger American trend known as American Fancy. What I find really interesting is that the American Fancy movement was also rooted in Enlightenment thinking, which I know we've all heard before, like Freemasonry, and the fancy signified almost any activity or object that delighted the human spirit or stirred the imagination. Bold colors and bright patterns attracted attention and were considered very pleasing. And fancy objects were intended to elicit emotions and expand the imagination. Again, many of the sources for fancy style will sound familiar. Ancient Greek and Roman traditions, geometric designs and equations, and an interest in aesthetics. With its bright colors, layers of decoration, and rich gold painted symbols, this apron exemplifies the fancy style. Unfortunately, I don't know anything about where or who used this apron. And then I just threw this slide in. These are some other objects in our collection to help you see that this was a full-blown style, record of art style. In the early 1800s, you see furniture and ceramics and quilts all have that very colorful, interesting kind of, some might say, I guess, crazy blend of color and pattern. The skill level of the painting on this apron, with its realism and its richness of detail, suggests that it may have been done by a professional artist, but it's not signed, and once again, we don't know who originally owned it. It's a royal arch apron that features a prominent archway and three figures, king, high priest, and scribe. By the 1840s, the fancy style started to decline. The invention of photography and increasing industrialization began to encourage an interest in more realistic art and decoration. So, number 7, Masonic aprons can be biographical objects. Each of these aprons celebrates the Masonic career of its owner. Biographical objects is a term that's been used by anthropologists to identify personally meaningful objects that take on a life of their own. In addition to the story that they tell about their owners, these aprons gain sentimental value as they were kept by the original owners' families and passed down through the generations. The older of the two aprons belonged to Gideon W. Schofield of Greenfield, New York, which is near Saratoga. As a young man in 1850, Schofield worked as a tanner, and 10 years later, he was listed on the census as a gentleman and owned real estate worth $4,000, which was not inconsiderable at the time. Later in his life, he ran his farm of 55 acres and lived with his wife, Mary. They didn't ever have any children. His Masonic activities are spelled out on his apron, and again, I apologize for the slide being kind of small, but the name of his lodge and the dates of his degrees are painted in a silver shield, silver and the gold shapes. The shield at the left side tells us that he joined St. John's Lodge number 22 in 1863 and received the first 3 degrees, and it gives the dates. With remarkable speed, he became master of his lodge in 1865 and served that role for 10 years, 1875, and then again in 1877. The gold shield on the right side of the apron tracks his degrees in St. John's chapter number 103, and he received those degrees. Again, it gives the dates at the end of 1865 and then into 1866. This apron, which was owned by Carl Leonard Lidfeldt, dates to 1911, after he was initiated into all 4 bodies of the Scottish Rite. According to the inscription under the flap, Rochester, New York's Valley Lodge number 109 presented the apron to Lidfeldt when he was raised a Master Mason on May 31st, 1910. And the body of the apron lists the dates in 1910 and 1911 when he was initiated into each Scottish Rite body. Lidfeldt had been born in Sweden in 1883 and then immigrated to the U.S. in the early 1900s. He lived in Rochester with his wife and their daughter and son and worked as a waiter at the Powers Hotel. And the photo was already in our collection. We bought this apron relatively recently, and I was very excited to find the Rochester consistory photo. And he's, I think, 3rd row from the back, and about the 3rd one in from the right. If you buy the book, you can see it a little closer. No plug there. Okay, number 8. The bonds of brotherhood did cross the lines of war during the Civil War. So this apron has an inscription on the back that reads, captured at the Battle of Logan's Field, Kentucky, January 19, 1862, by M.D. Manson, commanding 2nd Brigade. It wasn't uncommon for Union soldiers who were Freemasons to find Masonic charters and aprons while on the march and to bring them home as souvenirs or for preservation. Mahlon Dickerson Manson, the M.D. Manson of the inscription, was born in Ohio in 1820. He became a druggist and moved to Indiana in 1842, where he taught school, took medical classes, and maintained a business as an apothecary. He joined Warren Lodge number 24 in Ohio in 1841, and also joined the Knights Templar of the Scottish Rite. So when the Civil War began in 1861, Manson was quickly promoted from captain to colonel and commanded part of the 10th Regiment, Indiana Infantry. As noted in the inscription on this apron, he commanded the 2nd Brigade on January 19, 1862, when the Confederates attacked the Union troops at Logan's Crossroads. Ultimately, the Union troops were successful, pushing back the Confederates to Murfreesboro and suffering only 262 casualties to the Confederate Army's 529. After the war, Manson returned home to Indiana and became involved in politics. In 1884, he was elected Lieutenant Governor of Indiana. And it's likely that the proper owner of this apron was unknown, so General Manson kept it in his own collection. It was passed down through 4 generations of his family before it was donated to the museum by one of his ancestors. Okay, so we're in the home stretch here. I don't think I'm over time yet. Number 9. There are many mystery aprons and aprons with mysteries still to research and study. So I've mentioned some of the aprons here already that came to the museum's collection without any history about when and where they were made or who wore them. And sadly, the cover star from our book is also in this category. It was donated to the museum in 1994, but we don't know anything about where it came from or who made or owned it. But we can still learn from it. I like this apron because it reflects the beginning of the change to a standardized shape and design that was taking place in the mid-1800s. While the apron itself has that square body and that pointed flap that would become practically universal by the late 1800s, it still has the hand-painted decoration and the silver trimming that were popular on older aprons cut in a rounded shape. And this is just one more mystery, which is also one of my favorite aprons. It's marked with an inscription under the flap, made in 1896, property of Irwin J. Roberts. And I was able to discover that Roberts was born in Redford, New York in 1869. By 1894, he moved to North Adams, Massachusetts. And in 1896, he joined Lafayette Lodge and presumably purchased or was given this apron. The mystery comes when we turn to its maker. I would love to know who made it. It's hard to tell from the photo, but the symbols are all cut out of metal, primarily silver and brass. We had them tested. And they're engraved with details, and then they're attached with little metal tabs that fold under the leather, and then they're covered by the backing fabric. The apron's use of metal emblems fits with the arts and crafts aesthetic of the late 1800s and early 1900s. This is a movement that started during a time of increased industrialization, and it placed a premium on fine workmanship. So this apron really stands out in comparison to many mass-produced ones that the regalia companies were making during the late 1800s. But I still sort of wish I knew where it came from and who made it. Okay, so number 10, my last point. You will find connections when you least expect it, which will inspire you to keep learning. My favorite part of this book project was making connections between aprons and people, between aprons and other objects. And this is an apron that we purchased at auction in 2014. And I was very excited about it because I had not seen the design before. But there was no history with the apron. And once again, no information about the artist or the printer or the owner. And then one day I was looking at certificate frames for an entirely different project. And I came across a certificate in our collection with the exact same design. I was very, very excited. And thankfully, the certificate had a printed credit line along the bottom. A slide here where you can see the certificate and the apron. So the Master Mason certificate was produced by publisher Robert McCoy in 1854. McCoy had been born in Ireland and then came to New York City as a child. He pursued the printing and publishing business and joined New York's Lebanon Lodge number 313 in 1848. So the similarities between the certificate, the part at the top there, and then the apron, suggests that McCoy produced it for sale to American Freemasons during the mid-1800s. So to finish up, there's still much history to learn from these aprons and others. When I started the book, I was happy to get more information out there and published, but I also really wanted to encourage others to research these objects and add to the story. So hopefully today you'll take some new information away and perhaps be inspired to look into an apron or another Masonic object or document that fascinates you. So again, thank you very much. I don't know if we have a little time for questions, but I'm also upstairs on the tower floor, and we do have the book available for sale if you would like to learn more, and I'm always happy to sign it. So, questions? Yes?
Probably the most poignant thing I've ever seen from Freemasonry was Meriwether Lewis's apron. It was on display at the Smithsonian, and it had pretty basic embroidery on it, but according to the museum, it had his blood on it because he carried it in his last trip when he was leaving to defend himself in Washington for supposed misdeeds as governor of Louisiana, and he died in Tennessee when the apron was on him. Was it common for people to carry their aprons on their travels and into extreme situations such as the battlefield,
That's a really interesting question. I think in some cases people did. I mean, I would have to really look around to find the examples. I think the Civil War ones, which are the ones I looked at the most, it's often more, I think, the troops either side that found it either on a person or in a house or somewhere. But that's a really interesting question, and I think it would sort of depend if the person was traveling and planning to attend meetings. I mean, we have quite a lot of traveling certificates in our collection as well, and I can only surmise, I guess, or theorize that if you had a traveling certificate and you were traveling around and planning to use it, you might bring an apron with you. And certainly in the early 1800s, when you were having a really nice apron made, you might want to show it off and bring it with you. But it's an excellent question for more research. Sure. Oh, you're all tired. Or you all want to come upstairs and you can ask me questions after.